Sup humans, this is the Power Up Mushroom and I'm coming to you with the third video for our Final Fantasy Week marathon. Hopefully this video uploads in time and I don't have a problem uploading it. I've been having a lot of trouble with YouTube these past couple of days. But anyways, by the title of the video, you know what I'm going to be talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. That's why I'm just saying I'm just pull this one out of nowhere and we're just going to go ahead and talk about my favorite bosses from Final Fantasy. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I just said that. Now I actually have to talk about it. So some of my favorite bosses from Final Fantasy. Now, I could just say Sephiroth and just be done with it, but there's a lot of things. I guess I can go more into the bosses and why I like these bosses, why they made them, why they were so good to me, personally. One boss that I think that gets overlooked of like every boss in the Final Fantasy games, Kuja. Well, obviously from Final Fantasy 9, but I think Final Fantasy 13 too had a boss that I think they could have, there was a lot of potential there. They could have used this boss for future Final Fantasies, like what they made it for Final Fantasy 3. He could have been the next Sephiroth, and that's Caius. Caius from Final Fantasy 13-2 was so underused in that game. Specifically Final Fantasy 13-2 and then Lightning Returns. Like, he was there, but he just wasn't used. He could have been in Final Fantasy 13 as well. Not a lot of people like Final Fantasy 13, and I'm going to explain for a brief moment why I did enjoy Final Fantasy 13 just real quick. But you know what, never mind. I'll save that for a different video. But Final Fantasy 13, in a nutshell, I really did enjoy it. I really enjoyed the characters, the cast. I thought the story was really well put together. I thought it was something that it made sense. You know, I liked the way 13 ended. If it was a standalone game, it would have been fantastic if you just stopped right there. Like, just stop, Square Enix. Stop. It was okay the way it ended, but no, they made 13-2, and when 13-2 happened, they might have fixed a lot of the problems that 13 had, but why not just make another Final Fantasy or make it a spin-off? That was my idea. But Caius appeared in Final Fantasy 13-2, and he was an awesome villain. I think he was great. His motive was there. He had a reason to hate Lightning, and you know what happened to that person that he really cared about. Spoilers alert, or spoiler alert. Can't talk right now. He had a reason to really hate Lightning, you know, and after what happened to his that person that he really cared about. And seeing Caius, you know, go after Lightning and what's that guy's name? My bad for a second. I was about to call him Noct. It's Noel from Final Fantasy 13. 13-2. Seeing, like, you know, like just Caius kind of go after him and Sarah, and then, like, you know, there's a lot of you know, build for that character. It just, I felt it wasn't used. Not to mention he had an awesome theme. I think his theme, they were really going for the one-winged angel from Final Fantasy 7 type thing on his theme, and that made it a lot more better because he had like this opera behind him, and that battle theme was like so great. And I really felt like there could be a second version for that battle theme. Like, if Square Enix, if you guys would have done something with that character, I really feel that he could have made for a way better villain, and he was a fantastic villain when he was on screen. It's just kind of one of those things that there was a lot of potential and it was just wasted, and that really sucks. I just wish that, you know, he could have been a better villain, but for what he was, I really did enjoy Caius as a villain in Final Fantasy 13-2 and Lightning Returns a little bit, but it was, I felt that battle should have been a lot more epic in Lightning Returns, but it is what it is. But yeah, he's one of my favorite villains in the Final Fantasy series. That I don't think a lot of people are going to like me for saying that, but yeah, he's one of my favorites. Another one of my favorites, this one's kind of an obvious choice, I'm going to just go ahead and say it, Kefka from Final Fantasy 6. More specifically, when I think of Kefka from Final Fantasy 6, I played the SNES version. He's really sinister, and he did have a lot of, like, he had a lot of dark humor. And it was one of those things that you kind of look at like, oh dang, you know, that was a little dark, you know, kind of just twirling your thumbs or whatever. I don't know, but he was an awesome villain, and he's one of those villains I would love to see portrayed in a like a remake of Final Fantasy VI. If they did a remake of Final Fantasy VI, that'd be amazing. Like, there's a lot of things I'd want from that, but again, another video I will talk about that. But Kefka, he was one of those villains that I just saw, and he was just really insane. Like, he looked crazy, and he's almost like the Joker for he's almost like the Joker for the Final Fantasy universe. That's kind of what I liked about him, and they really made that known through Final Fantasy Dissidia. That's when his character really shined. I liked how they expanded his character a little bit in that one. They could have probably done more with him. Granted, it is a portable system, but for what they did for that portable system, Kefka was a really awesome villain. Not to mention, spoiler alert, guys, Kefka does get to destroy the world, and it was really cool to see the villain win for once. Not to mention, he saw himself as a god, and it was, hey, that was real edgy. Like, I just liked how his villain actually succeeded in that game. It was awesome. Another villain I really like, he doesn't get a lot of attention. It was more like in Final Fantasy X, everyone's kind of focused on Sin and Jecht, which Jecht, he wasn't really a villain. He was kind of like somebody who was real tough on his boy. But Seymour he was a pretty decent villain. He was one of those villains, like, yeah, he probably didn't have like a lot of those elite powers like Sephiroth or anybody else, which is why I think those villains were really cool. But he was more of like what do you call it? He was powerful in like that magic state. He did have a lot of power, you know. He just really wasn't agile, or he didn't have that agility like the other villains did. But they in that game, they really made you hate him. He forced Yuna to kind of marry him, and it was one of those things that I kind of saw. You could see from the perspective of like Tidus why he hated Seymour, and why that, you know, that whole marriage thing. I think that's what really like got you, a lot of the people that played Final Fantasy X, to really hate him. It's just, no one wanted to see Seymour win, and like that entire event, how it took place, it just made you hate him more. Not to mention he summoned this like forbidden summon. I forgot what the summon was, and I just beat the game again last year. If I can't pinpoint exactly what happened, I would have to go and refresh my memory and play the game again. So that's he's one villain I really did enjoy. But he is one that's overlooked, because overall Sin was the one that was kind of, you know, he was the big baddie, and he was more of like an entity in the game. So that's the one we kind of focused on, because he destroyed worlds and we had to defeat him. And Yuna was gonna eventually, she was gonna have to face off against Sin, and we all know how that tragedy was gonna play out and what happened at the end of the game. But yeah, Seymour, I liked him as his villain, but they didn't do a lot for his character in that game again. So maybe in a future installment of Final Fantasy 13-3, like, we get some backstory, which I doubt it, because of the way the events of Final Fantasy X took place. Again, I think I see more wasted potential, but hey, there it is. But it was still he was still a good villain for what he was. Now, we're going to get to my favorite villain of all time, and this one, I have to get this out, because I could talk about this all day, and my camera's about to die. Sephiroth. Sephiroth is my favorite Final Fantasy villain, and I already know why people are probably already like disliking or whatever. But look, there's a reason. It's just, I feel that Sephiroth, he's had more development than any other villain in the Final Fantasy series. Any of them. Golbez, he was only there for Final Fantasy 1. You have the Cloud of Darkness, Final Fantasy 3. 4, you have Cecil, and well, Cecil wasn't really a bad guy. But you know, X-Death in Final Fantasy 5. And then I think it was Golbez in Final Fantasy 4. That's where I was getting at. And then 6, you had Kefka. And then just 7 was one of those games, it created its own universe, and it really expanded the story of its villains and characters, and I really, really enjoyed that. It was amazing. More specifically, Sephiroth got his like more shining, like, you got to see Sephiroth as a hero in Crisis Core. It was kind of one of those things where I see it kind of like a Star Wars film. Like, Final Fantasy 7 could be like the entire episodes of A New Hope, freaking Empire Strikes Back, and then Return of the Jedi. But then Crisis Core is like the pre-episodes. It's the prequel. And that prequel did so much justice. Okay, you know what? Never mind. That's a bad comparison, because Star Wars did not do Anakin justice. But you get what I'm saying. Crisis Core did a lot for Sephiroth, because you got to see that fall of Sephiroth. You got to see him be a hero. You got to see him at his prime, and then to see him fall so low and just turn on everyone he cared about, his friends, just the people he served, his, you know, and what he believed in. It just all went downhill when he found out the truth and like those experiments that just created him. And I think that's what really built Sephiroth as a villain. Not only that, but his relationship with Cloud. Cloud and the entire cast of characters that were there, and how everyone and the world was affected by Sephiroth and his falling. No one could believe that Sephiroth was this great hero, and then how far he fell, you know, from being that once great hero that everyone looked up to. Cloud saw Sephiroth as something that, you know, hey, that's like an idol he'd look up to, along with Zack too. And they wanted to be like Sephiroth. Not only that, but through the course of Final Fantasy VII, Cloud, you know, you find out through the game that Cloud has had different encounters with Sephiroth. And through Crisis Core, that game better explains this entire origin story of Sephiroth. And I don't want to really go into it. If you guys haven't played Crisis Core, I can only urge you guys that you guys really need to try out that game, because it is an amazing title. The voice acting is spot on. The combat isn't that bad, but the story is really what holds it together. I'd say it is probably as good as The Last of Us, but Sephiroth, in my opinion, I do think he is probably one of the better villains, but the only reason for that is because he was the only villain in the Final Fantasy series that got fleshed out through other media like movies, spin-offs, and you know, like Dissidia. They even expanded more on his character and how sinister he could be. I just wish that Final Fantasy or Square Enix would do more with their characters like that, and maybe just make a better villain. I know they can do it, but I just feel like they're not trying hard enough. But anyways, those are my favorite villains from Final Fantasy, the Final Fantasy series. There's a lot of villains in the series that I really enjoy, but those are some of my favorites. What are some of y'all's favorites? I mean, leave a link, or not a link. Yeah, you know what? Leave a link to your own video in the comments below. You know, remember to like, comment, subscribe, upvote if you're. No, your Vidme's going down. Anyways, remember when you guys are gaming, power up.